Hello everyone, and welcome to the It's Funny to Tears channel. Today, I'm about to share a story that proves I should probably stay out of the kitchen for everyone's safety. It all started with a noble quest to bake a magnificent 3-layer Black Forest cake for my friend's birthday. I had this grand vision of a chocolate masterpiece, dripping with cherries and topped with perfect swirls of whipped cream. I even bought a fancy new apron for the occasion. Spoiler alert, the apron did not survive. So I pulled up a recipe online. It looks simple enough. An easy, no-fail Black Forest cake, the title promised. Lies, all lies. The first sign of trouble came with the ingredients. The recipe called for sour cherries. I went to 3 different stores, and all I could find was sweet cherries. I figured, cherries are cherries, right? How different can they be? This was my first mistake, a classic case of culinary overconfidence. I just thought a little less sugar in the batter should balance it out. Simple. Back in the kitchen, I laid out all my ingredients like a professional chef on a cooking show. Flour, cocoa powder, sugar, eggs, everything was there. I started with the dry ingredients. The recipe said to gently sift the flour and cocoa powder together. I don't own a sifter, so I decided to use a fine mesh strainer. I poured the flour in, gave it a little shake, and poof! A cloud of white powder exploded all over me, my new apron, and a good portion of my kitchen counter. I looked like I'd just lost a fight with a ghost. My dog, who was watching from a safe distance, just tilted his head, probably wondering if this was a new avant-garde art form. Okay, deep breaths, a little mess never hurt anyone. I cleaned up the flour apocalypse and moved on to the wet ingredients. The recipe said to melt the butter and chocolate together in a double boiler. Again, who owns a double boiler? I decided to improvise by putting a glass bowl over a pot of simmering water. It seemed to be working. The chocolate was melting beautifully, all glossy and smooth. I was feeling pretty smug, thinking, see, who needs fancy equipment? Then my phone rang. It was my friend, the birthday girl, calling to chat. I tucked the phone between my ear and shoulder and continued stirring. We talked for about 5 minutes, and in that short time, disaster struck. I smelled it before I saw it. A bitter, acrid smell. I looked down, and my beautiful, glossy chocolate had turned into a lumpy, grainy, burnt mess. It looked like gravel. I had single-handedly ruined a perfectly good bar of expensive dark chocolate. At this point, a sensible person might have given up and ordered a cake from a bakery, but not me. I was determined. I threw out the burnt chocolate, washed the bowl, and started again. This time I paid attention. No phone calls. The second attempt was successful. I had a bowl of perfectly melted chocolate. I felt like I had just climbed Mount Everest. I combined the wet and dry ingredients, and the batter actually looked like cake batter. It was thick, dark, and chocolatey. Hope was rekindled. I greased my cake pans, poured in the batter, and slid them into the preheated oven. The recipe said to bake for 30 to 35 minutes. I set a timer for 30 minutes and decided to use a toothpick to check for doneness, just like a real baker. While the cakes were baking, I started on the whipped cream frosting. This should be easy, right? It's just cream and sugar. I poured the heavy cream into my stand mixer, turned it on high, and walked away to check my social media. Big mistake. Huge. I was scrolling through cat videos when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It was a rhythmic thumping sound. Thump, thump, thump. I ran back to the kitchen to find my stand mixer dancing across the counter, spewing cream everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, my hair. Everything was covered in a fine mist of cream. I'd over-whipped it. It had gone past the fluffy, airy stage and straight into a separated, curdled mess that looked suspiciously like cottage cheese. I had essentially made very, very bad butter. The oven timer beeped, a welcome distraction from the dairy disaster. I pulled out the cakes. They smelled amazing. I did the toothpick test and it came out clean. Success. I let them cool for a few minutes, then tried to flip them out of the pans. The first one came out perfectly. It was a beautiful, dark, round layer of cake. I was so proud. Then I tried to flip the second one. It didn't budge. I shook the pan. Nothing. I tapped it. Still nothing. I got a knife and ran it around the edge. It was stuck, solidly stuck. In a moment of sheer desperation, I gave it one final, violent shake. Half the cake plopped onto the cooling rack, while the other half remained stubbornly glued to the bottom of the pan. It was a crater of broken dreams. So now I had 1.5 cakes, no edible frosting, and a kitchen that looked like it had been through a blizzard. But my friend's birthday was the next day, and I had promised her a cake. I refused to be defeated. I took the broken cake layer and crumbled it up into a bowl. Then I took the whole, perfect layer and did the same. My new plan? Cake pops. Yes, a brilliant pivot. I mixed the cake crumbs with some kind of binder, rolled them into balls, and dipped them in chocolate. What could go wrong? I looked around for a binder. The whipped cream was a lost cause, but I had a jar of cream cheese frosting in the pantry from a previous, less ambitious baking attempt. I scooped it into the bowl of cake crumbs and started mixing. It turned into a sticky, goopy, brown sludge. It did not look appetizing, but I persevered. I tried to roll the mixture into balls. It was like trying to roll mud. It stuck to my hands, the counter, everything. Eventually, I managed to form a dozen misshapen lumps that looked more like meteorites than cake pops. I put them in the freezer to firm up, hoping that would solve the stickiness issue. While my sad little cake meteorites were chilling, I had to tackle the chocolate coating. I was not about to try melting chocolate again. Instead, I found some of those candy melts, the kind you just microwave. The package said foolproof. This was a direct challenge to my abilities. I put them in a bowl, microwaved them in 30-second intervals, and stirred. To my astonishment, it actually worked. I had a bowl of smooth, melted white candy coating. Maybe my luck was turning. I took the cake lumps out of the freezer. They were firmer, but still incredibly sticky. I tried to dip the first one into the white coating. As I lifted it out, the stick slipped, and the entire lump plopped back into the bowl with a loud splash, sending a tidal wave of molten white candy all over me and the counter. I now had white polka dots on top of my flour dusting and cream splatter. My apron was a Jackson Pollock painting of my failures. I just stood there for a full minute, covered in goo, and started laughing. It was so ridiculous, so utterly disastrous that it was hilarious. At that moment, my roommate walked in. He just stopped, looked at me, looked at the kitchen, and said, "What happened in here? Did a bakery explode?" I couldn't even form words. I just pointed at the bowl of sludge and the single half-coated cake pop stick. He started laughing too. That's when I knew this story was gold. So what happened in the end? I threw Utpadan out. All of it. The cake meteorites, the splattered candy melts, everything. I cleaned the kitchen for 2 hours. The next day, I went to the best bakery in town and bought the most beautiful, professionally made Black Forest cake you've ever seen. When I gave it to my friend, I told her the whole story. We laughed so hard she was crying. She said the story was a better gift than any homemade cake. And you know what? She was right. Sometimes the best memories aren't made from our successes, but from our spectacular, hilarious failures. The moral of the story is, if you ever see a recipe that says no fail, run. Run far away. Or at least have a backup plan and a good sense of humor. Thanks for watching. And if you have your own cooking disaster story, please share it in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of glorious failure. See you next time.